It just means more. Easy way to start the show. That's been the SEC mantra for a number of years. It just means more. And have I made fun of it? Few times. Have a lot of people made fun of it? Absolutely. Have people made fun of it because of fill in the blank? Just it's easy to make fun of. Or is there some jealousy, some envy involved? Absolutely, there is out there. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you all stopping by. I apologize for being late, but we've got back-to-back shows here at the Voice of College Football. And so thank you for being here and being patient. We were wrapping up our Miami show, so check it out over on the Miami channel. Always an exceptional show with Cam Underwood from State of the U. Preceding that, Florida State Live with George from Renegade Report and James from the Den Media Group. So Florida State, Miami, maybe future members of the SEC, maybe, probably not, but maybe. Okay, let's get to the SEC. We have left the link in the chat, so please give me a call. Hopefully you have checked out the numbers, the metrics, and the explanation of our SEC program rankings all time. We will do so once again right here, and let's get to the numbers. Amazon links in the description section of all the videos, so please use the Amazon link when you shop on Amazon. If you don't shop on Amazon, good for you. Don't do it for me. Don't do it on account of me. But if you shop on Amazon and enjoy the content, then it makes total sense to use the Amazon link in the description section of all the videos on all the channels. It's there and easy to find. It says Amazon in caps. Just grab that link. It is the same exact shopping experience. Let's get to the numbers. And it reads like this. Win percentage is in the left column, and we will show these numbers in a little bit more of a readable, palatable form here in just a second, but this is where I've got the spreadsheet that I work on, and here we go. Alabama's got the tied for basically the best winning percentage of all time. Yes, Ohio State, Michigan, they are a smidge ahead at 734. Bama's at 733. It's a virtual tie. And then we see from there, I don't have them ordered perfectly. Let's do this because, again, this is a working document. And then let's move up Tennessee because they are in the next slot right there. And there we pretty much have them all in order. So you've got the Bama, Oklahoma tier, Texas, as we see there at 702. And you may be saying, Mark, why are you ranking Oklahoma and Texas along with everybody else in the SEC? They haven't played in the SEC. I am pretty well aware of that. This is just to basically say, and if you watch the video, I definitely differentiate the Oklahoma and Texas totals from everyone else. And if you watch the Big 12 video, I include Oklahoma and Texas. There is no perfect delineation of these teams because even, let's say, Oklahoma and Texas playing all these years against each other, they've only played the last 28 seasons in the same conference. So they were even playing for the majority of their existence in college football against different competition. It may be similar competition, but Oklahoma was playing in the Big 8 and Texas was playing in the Southwest Conference. So there are all sorts of conditions here, all sorts of contextual components to this that can be broken down and discussed. But the all-time winning percentage looks like that. LSU strong, Tennessee strong, Georgia strong, pretty much all in the same bucket. Florida did not have much football success until the late 1960s. Steve Spurrier, and I'm talking about Steve Spurrier as a player first, and then pretty much strong throughout the 80s, 90s, up until Billy Napier. Auburn, of course, they've had a up and down history, but strong under Pat Dye, Tommy Tuberville, and of course, they have peaked with national championships and championship appearances in 2010 and 13. Texas A&M has not won a conference title, and we'll get to that, since 1998, or a national championship since 1939, and on down the tote board. And for as bad as Vanderbilt has been, folks, for as bad as Vandy has been, and we will clear the graphics so you can see Vandy down there at the bottom, not surprisingly, at 482. That is much better than their counterparts in other conferences. You've got the likes of Indiana and Wake Forest down there at 42% winning percentage. So Vandy at 482, still awful. And that's accentuated in a number of ways as well. So let's go down to the most recent times. So I did not include, let me make it very clear, the numbers we're going to go through right now, the most recent numbers in terms of record and rankings, are not included solely in those time slots, in those time frames, in our point system. Our point system is nothing but all-time rankings. So what we see here, if you go all the way to the record column here, that's the college football playoff era, and we see how good Bama is. That is the best record in the country. And we see Georgia at 114 and 22 in the last 10 years in the CFP era. That is number 3 in the country to Ohio State. Bama, Ohio State, Georgia, and then I believe that Oklahoma figure at 102 and 29 is number 4. Then after that, shoot, LSU's usually good. Of course, had the Joe Burrow season, 90 and 38, and on down the line. Again, you're going to see this ordered top to bottom here in just a second. But I wanted to go through the spreadsheet first. This is the 21st century, and this is a better race between Bama and Oklahoma, 249 and 242 in the win column, and Oklahoma's only lost 2 more games than Bama during that time. And other than that, wow, you got Georgia right there at 240 and 67, because even prior to Kirby Smart, Mark Richt had Georgia in the top 10 more times than not. Florida's strong, LSU's particularly strong, about 30 games better than Florida during that time. And again, Auburn has had some rough patches, but also been extremely strong. Arkansas has been all over the place, and of course have been non-existent at times. Missouri had a nice run in the Big 8, or during this time frame, I should say, the Big 12, because that conference was formed in 1996, and Missouri and Texas A&M moving to the SEC in 2012. Vandy by far the worst. This column here are records since 1970, and I will not go through my dissertation of why 1970 right now. I will if somebody asks me on a call. I will go through that. So leave your comments and questions in the chat. I will get to them. Whatever pops up there with the super chats in the comment section. And then also, if you want to give me a phone call, the link is in the chat. Bama's number 1 since 1970. No big surprise there. That was at the basic height of the Bear Bryant tenure, and he was there through 82. Then they had a decent run from the Bear to Saban, but not great. They did win a national championship under Gene Stallings, and were generally good, but not nearly as good. And then, of course, Saban took it off from there. Oklahoma's number 2 since 1970. Not surprising there. And then, wow, look at Georgia, 484. Now, if we would have done this 10 years ago, Texas would have been number 3. Texas, Tennessee, Georgia, LSU, Florida, Auburn, all those pretty much in the same category, between 425 and 480. And Vandy is the only school that has yet to win 200 games since 1970. And then if we take it down here, we go to the AP points. So what are those? The AP poll started in 1936, and teams are assigned points based on where they finish in the rankings. Is this ironclad, perfect, fair to a T? No. Is it 90-some% accurate? Yes. So we can look at any season throughout history, and you can find 5 to 10 teams that have an argument to be ranked, that were not ranked. Therefore, they are given no credit in the AP poll. They were number 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, whatever. So they get zero credit for that. They are treated like they are an 0-12 team. It's the same difference. So that's not valid. But the rankings themselves, for as much as I criticize the AP poll on a regular basis, individually, individual rankings, individual circumstances, when you wash it all out over 87 years, it's pretty accurate. Bama's number 1 in the SEC. Oklahoma's number 2. Again, not a member of the SEC. So, of course, an ardent SEC fan or just an observer like myself who is unbiased and neutral in this fight would say that Oklahoma and Texas have not played the caliber of football, at least over the last 15 years, having played in the Big 12 versus the SEC. But there have been times prior to that the Big 12 would have been just as tough as the SEC. But over the last 15 to 20 years, yes, the SEC has been the best conference. That is not debatable in any way. And if you would like to take up that debate, you can please call me. Tennessee, Georgia, LSU, all bunched up there. And then Auburn. Arkansas has been pretty strong with some really good teams throughout their history as well, mostly in the Southwest Conference. They joined the SEC in 92, as did South Carolina. Bowl wins. Bama's the best in the nation, 45. Oklahoma, Texas, Tennessee with 31. Georgia with 38. They're number 2. LSU's also over that number 30 mark in bowl victories. Major bowl wins. We've got Bama 32, and then Oklahoma 23, Texas 19, and of course, Georgia has really added to this total. Just think about Kirby Smart has won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Kirby Smart has won 8 major bowl games. Georgia's got 17. That's how much of an impact that somebody that elite can have on a program total, because you basically look at this and think, what does 5 years matter? Because we're looking at 120 years plus. So 5 years, you can't have that much of a dent, make that much of a dent. Well, in some categories, you can. And Kirby Smart certainly has, in terms of major bowl victories, as opposed to Tennessee, who, look at this, 6-7 years ago was ahead of Georgia in major bowl wins. And Tennessee's not won a major bowl game. Well, they won one 2 years ago against Clemson in the Orange Bowl. That was their first one in forever since Philip Fulmer. All right. Never mind these other point totals. Here we have conference championships. And we are not going to be able to fairly judge Oklahoma and Texas, of course, playing in different conferences. But the SEC, by and large, has been the most valid conference to rank top to bottom because, as we see over here, just about everybody joined the conference in 1932. That's unlike any other conference. Everybody else pretty much joined in 1932. Bama, Tennessee, Georgia, LSU, Florida, Auburn, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Vandy, and Kentucky. There you had the 10-team SEC in 1932 already. Now, Then you had South Carolina and Arkansas in 92. And then 10 years ago, you had Texas A&M and Mizzou. What in the world is that right there? Well, what that is a conference championship win percentage. What is that? Well, think about it. Is it fair to evaluate the number of conference championships that Arkansas has, joining 60 years after everyone else? No. Although it's zero, zero is zero. So in the case of Arkansas, it's just flat out zero. They've never won a conference championship. They have made it to the SEC championship game 3 times. 95, 02, and 06, lost every time. But this is more applicable in other conferences where there are teams jumping in and out every 20 years. So to see the percentage of conference championships they won during the time that they've been in the conference. So what's funny about this is that everybody joined in 1932, and there are no conference champions since then. So everybody that's won the SEC is an original member of the SEC. So that's kind of cool. South Carolina and Arkansas joined. They haven't won. Mizzou and Texas A&M joined. They have not won. South Carolina made one SEC championship game in 2010. They got obliterated by Auburn. And of course, Mizzou made it twice under Gary Pinkel. So we also have national championships. And you know who gets that column? Bama, 18. There they are, number 1. Oklahoma's number 2. They've got 9. And this is a controversial topic because unlike conference championships, there's no debating conference championships. You either won the conference, you didn't win the conference. It's all fair. Teams play each other. Maybe the scheduling's not completely fair, but we're all understanding of how the conference championship works. National championships, though, as it stands right this second, I'm basically just going by Winsipedia. But if you follow us here on a regular basis here at the Voice of College Football, you know that last off season, we tore apart every season from this past season all the way back to 1970, and we need to continue 1969 all the way to the beginning of national championship play, because I am not taking somebody else's word for who won national championships, because this is not the Super Bowl. This is not, okay, there was an objective system and 14 or 12 teams went into a tournament and played, and there's your champion. No, it's not the Super Bowl. It's not the World Series or the NBA championship. It is just arbitrary as to who was chosen national champion many years. And I rarely strip national championships, but there are that have been stripped, and I will strip them. And is it official? No, of course not. It's just my rating system. But I look at the record, the resume, everything involved. And so, for example, Auburn, you have just as much of a right to the 1983 national championship as Miami does. And you know what? If you understand what happened that season, go back and look. Texas, you have just as much right to a national championship as Miami did that particular year. If anything, Texas and Auburn played much more difficult schedules. So why are they not the national champions? Well, because they didn't get to play the number 1 team in the country in the Orange Bowl. Okay. But the bowl games are not playoff games. They're just additional games. So with Bama, we've got a video out. Check it out. We reviewed every Alabama national championship because people make fun of Alabama's national championships. Well, what I came out with is that Bama has 2 undeserving national championships that they claim. However, Bama also has 2 other seasons in which they could rightfully claim national championships. So came out in the wash. Bama's got 18 national championships. That's justified. Here we've got NFL draft selections, and look at that. Oklahoma by 6 over Bama. Those two are behind Notre Dame, USC, and Ohio State all time, and I don't believe anyone else. Texas, Tennessee, Georgia, strong, as well as LSU. Look at those 4 schools and include Florida. They're all between 363 and 381. And Auburn's also got over 300, as well as Texas A&M. And Arkansas has been strong in the NFL draft. Really, everyone in the SEC is over 200 draft picks, which is an impressive number if you check out that number, that list against the other conferences, except poor Vandy, of course. Here we've got first-round picks. Bama's number 1 by far in the SEC. Ohio State's number 1 all time, and USC's number 2. Bama, I believe, I'm almost certain, they're number 3. And then a lot of schools around 50. Florida, LSU, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas, Oklahoma. What is this column here? It's All-Americans. Bama's got the most. Oklahoma's number 2. Now, then there's a decent drop-off to Texas with 63. And then there's another decent drop-off. So that's a bit surprising that there's that much of a disparity in All-Americans. Now, if you think the way I do, then you might be raising some questions here to say wins and losses are objective. Wins and losses are objective. They matter. These are subjective totals. Somebody selecting these All-Americans, award winners, Heisman trophies. Yes, absolutely. Totally agree. However, I got to give it up to these sports writers. When you add it all up throughout history, their awarding of major awards almost lines up perfectly with the winning. The tiers of winning line up almost perfectly with the awards handed out. So those are all Americans. And then we've got Heisman Trophy winners here. Oklahoma is now number 1 in the SEC now that they've entered the league with 7, Bama with 4, and all those under Nick Saban. And then this figure right here is we are not just taking Heisman Trophy winners, we're taking major award winners. So think about all the positions. They all have a major award connected to them, whether that's running back, offensive line, tight end, wide receiver, and all the defensive positions, plus the Lombardi, the Nagurski, the Butkus, the Remington, the Walker, the Mackey, Biletnikoff, Guy, Groza, Thorpe. They're all represented right there. Bama with a lead over Oklahoma, 28-24. But again, these major award winners line up and the All-American selections right with the winning percentage. So that's pretty impressive, I got to say, from that standpoint. Jackson Johnson, 94 days until week 0 and 99 days until week 1. Can't wait. College football is, well, I don't want to say almost here, but it's getting here. And we would like everyone to know, let me get this green off of here because that doesn't seem to fit, does it? And I lost my SEC logo at the same time. I got so wrapped up in knocking out these rankings. But Jackson, appreciate you being here and setting us straight on the number of days until week 1 and week 0. And of course, we will launch the college football season here with our marathon. In the meantime, I'm simply going to run these results in a way that make a whole lot more sense probably to you, because you will see the lists in order behind me. And sorry to do that to you where you get to look at me twice, but you'll make it. So we will have the various lists up there very soon. Don't see any comments or questions there in the chat, except for our buddy Tim. We will see Tim on Friday night with Matt Zemek. It's every Monday. It's every Friday on the USC channel with Matt and Tim. And I join along on Monday. So that's a good time. Well, thank you for that, sir. Appreciate that. Also wanted to mention that on Friday night, what is this? No, this is Wednesday night. Let me get this straight. On Thursday night, we're going to run through the Big Ten. On Thursday night, we run through the Big Ten. On Friday, we put it all together, and we're going to do all the all-time rankings nationally. And then I'm going to call it quits on all-time rankings for another off season. Although I'm going to go through the national championships at some point, and we're going to revise them. And you know what we're going to do while we're doing that? I know it. We are going to piss so many people off. It's going to be fun. Am I doing that intentionally? Of course not. Of course not. Not doing that intentionally. But we're doing that just because it's the right thing to do. And we're going to honor teams that rightfully have a claim to a national championship. So we're going through all of the seasons, and we will get that done. And then I'll probably release a video, and that might be a year from now. I don't know at this pace, but we'll get to it. We will get to it. So again, Thursday night with the Big Ten, Friday night, we put it all together. So in place of our Big Ten show that we typically do on Friday, we're going to do it on Thursday because we want to get to the national rankings and throw all of these rankings and metrics together on Friday night at 7 Eastern. And then you join Tim and Matt at 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific. And now that we've got John's name on the screen, it reminds me that there's a special edition of Michigan Live coming up after us at 10 Eastern tonight. There was an article that was released, I believe, by CBS Sports about Jim Harbaugh's final days at Michigan that is rather intriguing. I have yet to look at it, but I will hear it through the eyes and ears of John and TJ over on the Michigan channel. That's at 10 Eastern tonight, folks. So get there. Please subscribe to our SEC channel. We have recently churned out some Texas and Ole Miss, and we've got Alabama coming up here soon. And we were going to set you up with all sorts of information heading into the season. Yes, it's a bit of a downtime, but next weekend, I believe, are the SEC coaches meetings in Destin. So there's always something interesting that pops out of that. Was it last year? No, it was the year before. Was it the year before, or was it last year that Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher had gone after each other concerning NIL, and then they had to show up at SEC coaches meetings together, and that was fun. So all sorts of things could happen at SEC coaches meetings in Destin. All right. B. Bean is here. Appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. We will have a number of announcements to make about our programming going forward. It does involve the SEC, and it does involve the Big Ten as well, in particular. Big 12 and ACC fans, we don't want to leave you out of it, but you understand we got a Big 12 channel, and we've got Miami, Clemson, and Florida State, and also Virginia Tech and North Carolina channels. Forget the last two, actually, because we don't do too much with those. But Florida State, Clemson, Miami, all going strong. And the real MVP stopping by to talk this up with us. DeReal, what's going on tonight?
Hey, Mark, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Love the background, by the way.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So let me ask you, there was a few common themes in your ranking that surprised me. So the gap between Alabama and Oklahoma to everybody else was pretty stark. I thought there would be some sort of a gap, but are you surprised of how large that gap is between those two teams?
Between those two and everyone else?
Correct.
Not really. Not really. Really, not much surprised me. Uh, Again, I'm going to credit the AP writers that their award selections and their All America choices, not just in this conference, but in every conference, almost lines up perfectly in terms of the winning throughout the years, step for step. But in terms of that, no, Oklahoma's been a blue blood elite program most of its existence, while I think it's pretty easy to see if you followed this conference for a long time that LSU, Georgia, Tennessee, Auburn, Florida's on the low end of this group, but there's a group of teams where we can all think of times where they've been really dominant or they've just been good, and very few times that they've been bad. But when you mix it all together and throw it all together, that they're almost identical, those 4 or 5 schools.
Right. Now, out of those pack of schools you were talking about, which one do you think over the next 5 or 10 years is likely to move up, and which one's likely to move down?
Well, I made a point. I don't know if you were here. I was going through the bowl wins all time, and I was going through the major bowl wins. And think about this: Georgia's got 17 major bowl wins, and Tennessee has 10. And 7 or 8 years ago, Georgia was behind Tennessee. Kirby Smart has won 8 major bowl games. He doubled Georgia's historical output by himself in a very short career. Georgia, Alabama has the question mark of Kalen DeBoer's tenure versus Nick Saban. So they don't have that constant, that established guy that we know what it's going to look like. Now, Kalen DeBoer could continue to do a great job, but there's no way he's matching what Nick Saban did. If he does, then that's all-time historic, if he's able to keep that up. So Georgia, yeah, they're going to continue to ascend up the charts. Look at that winning percentage this century. Bama's at 803, Oklahoma 793, Georgia 782.
Right. But I could play devil's advocate here, Mark, and I will
Okay.
for some pushback. They're playing more difficult schedules now than they were in the past. So in order to maintain that winning percentage is going to be more difficult.
Yeah. So, no, that's a great point. So, if you're just taking the bare statistics being what they are, yes, we can't expect anyone to continue the pace of their predecessors. But in terms of the competition, is still the same. The goals and the achievements are still the same. There's going to be one national champion, there's going to be one winner of each conference. So, where you place among your peers is going to be, that can be analogous. You can make those comparisons going forward.
Right. And I know that a lot of SEC fans feel the Big 12, and it has been, is the beneath us. So, was there any point during this you thought you would put a slight disadvantage weight on Texas and Oklahoma for playing in an easier schedule year over year compared to what the rest of the teams on the list had to do?
No. And this is why. What you're stating is totally valid. Totally valid. The SEC's been the best conference. It's been substantially better than the Big 12. However, I would have to nitpick all the way across the board, and not just who's got the best conference and how do I weight that subjectively. All these are objective numbers. They're like, I did the Big 12 and I had all sorts of people pissed at me. I don't know why. I'm just showing lists. That's all. I'm talking through it and I'm giving some context to it, but I'm just showing numbers. That's all this is. Now I can give it all sorts of context, and no, Oklahoma and Texas have not played the same competition over the last 20 years. And maybe even before that. I'd have to dig in a little bit more than that. I do think that the Big 12 was mighty competitive when it was first put together because Nebraska was just that good and they were part of this in the Big 12. But we certainly know in the last 20 years, and how do you judge that? Is a 750 winning percentage in the Big 12 equivalent to a 650 winning percentage? No, I didn't make any of my own opinions. That's what's funny about this is I had Big 12 fans mad at me. I had Michigan fans mad at me. I'm just throwing lists up there. And yes, I put a point system to it. And yes, that's involves judgment. But I never claimed that the list or the point system was perfect. But I think the one thing you got to give me some credit for, folks, is that it's exhaustive, it's comprehensive. Yeah, there could be more added to it, of course. I would love to add a strength of schedule component. Like if somebody could find me a database that has an all-time strength of schedule, I'd love to do that. And I would love to build a database to real where we could just plug in the year and just say, okay, what's this look like since 1950, since 1975, since 1980? Or what did this look like during the 80s? And we would just hit a button, it would all automate, and there we go. We would get a snapshot, because that's another thing that I took a hit for among the fan bases you can imagine, especially when we were doing the Big Ten, that I showed, and I'll back it up here, I showed the college football playoff era, and I showed the 21st century, and I showed since 1970. And people got upset about that. But those did not go in the point totals. Those were not separate categories. I was just showing, just to give context, this is what it looks like the last 10 years. This is the last 20 rough years since 2001, the 21st century, and here since 1970. I was in no way trying to say, I did not weight the system in any way based on recency, even though I think the recent games and recent decades and generations are much more valid than winning in 1901. I'm sorry, the national championship and those that have been won in the last 20 or 25 years are more valid than a national championship in 1908. Do I really need to explain why? I could, but I would hope that most people would understand. Yes, we are counting them just the same. If you look at national championships all time, it's going to say Alabama 18, and then it's going to have Harvard and Yale, and then you're going to have Michigan with 12. Now, I'm not trying to take away national championships from anyone that won them in 1901 and 1902, but no, I'm sorry, they're not as valid. You were playing Carlisle and Albion and club teams from universities and high school teams.
I thought you were just gonna. I was just gonna let you keep going, Mark.
I'll keep going with this because I gave this analogy the other. This is the best I can do. I'm not Mr. Analogy, but I'll state it this way. DeReal, let's say we decided to start a chess season, a chess league over the entire United States, and everybody in the chat is welcome to join. We all love to play chess. We're going to start a chess league in our own neighborhoods. Okay. You have no idea what's going on in my neighborhood. I have no idea what's going on in your neighborhood and who I'm selecting to join my chess league. But let's say everyone's being upfront and honest. We're all reporting honest results. But I tend to go out there and select, the 8-year-olds in the neighborhood that I can outsmart. And maybe there's some folks that are pretty sharp and I avoid them. So basically, I have cherry picked my schedule, but my results are valid. They are honest results. So I've submitted those. But over the course of time, word gets around and, Mark is just picking on a bunch of 10-year-olds and that's why he's, 38-2. the last 4 seasons, and so forth and so on. So then let's say after 10 or 15 years, we decide, okay, there needs to be an age limit. Okay, you need to be 18 and older. Okay, and so then we continue on, and we can come up with all sorts of scenarios where people could continue to, you know, game the system and pick on less advantaged people and so forth to bolster their record and their championships. But let's say that after that, we then determined, okay, we are going to have tests and their experience levels to join these leagues. Okay, that brings another criteria. This is what's happened in college football, that as the generations have ensued, there have been given more valid requirements to conferences and the formation of conferences and what teams schedule, how many games they play. We don't have 6-game national champions from 140 years ago. You have to play 12 games and you play in a conference and all of those things as well. And then consider this, and this will be my last point. You're an NFL fan, Daryl. I believe you're pretty aware that there's a roughly 70 or 72% of the participants in the NFL have a certain quality that is pretty easy to distinguish. They're black. You know, let's just say it. And so is that percentage as high in college football? No. But is that percentage nearly as high in regards to the best players? Yes, because they then ascend to the NFL. What was not happening in the 1920s and 30s and 40s? Those players, those people, unfortunately, were not allowed to play. Now, there wasn't a year in which all of a sudden, boom, there was desegregation and full integration of blacks into college football. It happened over time. But by 1970, and when some of these people unfairly criticized me for choosing 1970 as some arbitrary year, well, number one, it's a pretty good chunk of time. It's 54 football seasons. So if you're number one on a list covering 54 of the most recent football seasons, I think that tells us something, number one. Number two, it aligns with when the sport basically became fully integrated. And I think that's important. That's the end of my rant.
I think that's the only way to do it validly, Mark. I mean, I completely agree with you with basically everything you said. But Mark, I'm pretty sure all these fans that claim these 1900 national championships are as valid as last year's are only doing it because it benefits their team. If the situation was reversed, they wouldn't be arguing that. In fact, they would be arguing the opposite. Do you agree with that?
That's funny that you say that, because as soon as that came out of your mouth, I made this statement a few weeks ago. I said, now any honest person, right-thinking, honest person, including myself, let's say you have a battle with your chief rival, and it's a very close battle. It's a very close statistical battle all time. If we could magically switch those histories, just swap them, all the points that you were making for your school, for your team, you would suddenly be suppressing, and you would then be arguing the points of your rival. Now, we all can be honest and admit to that. Yes, exactly. Kentucky basketball. I don't know if you really have a rival, do you? You've squashed the SEC for most of your history.
Louisville's probably the biggest rival just because of their location to us, and all time they're great. But our rivals are like Duke, Kansas, North Carolina, those types of schools.
Exactly. So let's say that we had Duke and North Carolina basketball fans on here that were extremely knowledgeable, and they were debating you about the best program of all time, and you wanted to. I don't know if you hold this opinion, but let's say you did, that Kentucky was the greatest basketball program of all time. you would obviously suppress certain parts of history and you would emphasize others to prove your point. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you suddenly had to switch the history and you had to take on North Carolina's all-time results, well, then you would be arguing their points. Absolutely.
Right, and I have the intelligence or good faith enough to freely admit that. And I do firmly believe Kentucky is unquestionably the greatest basketball team of all time, Mark. I mean, just look at Arkansas. They're doing backflips over hiring a leftovers head coach for Kentucky. I mean, that's so desperate and so petty and so debasing yourself. I mean, it's frankly embarrassing, Mark. Imagine if Michigan hired Ohio State's head coach and they were doing backflips. How embarrassing would it be to that fan base? I mean, just pathetic, Mark. Just pathetic. And kind of sad, to be honest with you.
Yes, that does sound a bit embarrassing.
Yeah, I know.
Is there video evidence of this?
Well, if you go to Locked On Arkansas, when they first hired John Calipari, they were arguing legitimately this was the greatest hire in the history of college basketball. I'm not making that up. So they're just all over the place with what they,
Getting back to the football here, I stopped the graphic right here because what I did, and I think this is very valid too, because when people look at AP poll points, it's kind of like, okay, your mind gets a little lost. Okay, they got 983 and they got 751. Okay, I understand that's better than that. But what I broke it down to here is that first number is the number of seasons that those schools finished ranked in the top 25. The second number is how many times in the top 10, and the third number, the top 5. And it's just amazing to me that Vanderbilt, Iowa State, and Indiana, and Wake Forest just stand out as just playing football in the abyss for over 100 years and accomplishing almost nothing.
Well, Mark, to be fair about it, Kentucky was in that position until they hired Stoops.
Yeah, those 10 top 25 finishes, he's tacked on a couple.
Yeah, well, those two top 10s one of them could be his. That 2018 might be his.
Yeah, I'd have to look. I know that's close. I know that they could have been considered one. Certainly, they could have finished in the top 10. I don't think they did actually, but it could have been a top 10 team.
Right. I noticed during your rankings there was a massive gap between Missouri and Kentucky. And honestly, the only reason Kentucky's ahead of Mississippi State and South Carolina is because of Mark Stoops. I mean, that just tells you how brilliant of a head coach he is. And I don't understand why Texas A&M hated him. Instead, they got Mike Elko, who's basically the exact same as Mark Stoops, except less proven. But
well, until further notice, I am a Mike Elko fan, but I'm also a Mark Stoops fan. So I can appreciate both, but I do think the point that you just made is valid, that Stoops has obviously proven it. Elko is more of a hot commodity. Everyone's gotten used to Stoops and his accomplishments, so that we turned a 2 or 3 win program into an 8-win program is kind of passe. Okay, we get it. He did it. What's he doing now? Where Elko just, bam, got to Duke 2 seasons ago and turned it on and improved them. So he's more of a hot commodity.
Agree. The final thing I'll ask you about is, with the new playoff format happening this year, when do you think will be the first time we see a Big 12 or an ACC team host a home playoff game?
So for folks that are not following the format, that's basically a second place or third place team from one of those conferences hosting the playoff game, meaning that they are the 5 through, well, they would be the 5 through 8 seeds. I could see Clemson or Florida State hosting a playoff game as a 11-1 conference championship game loser, or I guess they would be 11-2.
Right. It's interesting. People in the chat are saying Utah. But if Utah, I feel like, is the favorite to win the Big 12. And if they win the Big 12, they will not host the playoff game. They would have to finish second.
Yeah, they would. It would have to be a situation like we saw a couple years ago where TCU was undefeated. They weren't that great, but credit to them. They were undefeated. They lose the conference championship game. They're still 12-1, 13-1, whatever the record was, 12-1. And they're second place. They're not the conference champion. So maybe Utah, we looked at Utah's schedule a couple weeks ago. They've got an awful schedule. It's easy. Their schedule is terrible. And could Utah go 12-0 and lose the conference championship game? Yes, it's possible. It's very improbable. Yeah, if they're that good, they're probably going to finish off the conference, but upsets do happen. So yeah, that's a good possibility that people are offering up in Utah.
Okay, because I personally think it should be. I only think one ACC and one Big 12 team should be in there, unless two of them go like 11-1.
Well, let's watch the season first.
I know. I'm just saying, based off how I currently see the landscape. That's how I feel about it. If Michigan goes 9-3, they should be in the playoff over any Big 12 team that goes 10-2, for example. Just generally.
I know you're not prepared to make your predictions, but if you had to select 12 teams right now, and we were going to give you $100 for every right response, who are your 12 teams to make the playoffs?
Georgia, Bama, Texas, Oklahoma, Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, Utah, Florida State. I'm still Liberty. We'll go with Liberty. I'll just give that $100 back, Mark.
The five is. I'm more focused on the Power Five. Yeah, Power Four.
I'm still missing two spots, which is tough. Penn State and Ole Miss.
Okay. All right. Anything else real?
I saw you do a live stream a few hours ago on the Florida State channel talking about realignment. What conference is Florida State in?
They are playing in the ACC.
Okay, and do the people that you were talking to about realignment still realize this fact that they're still in the ACC?
You understand they're in court, and
I understand, but they're still in the ACC. I understand they're in the courtroom, but they're going to be playing football games.
And the legalities on the line. Can you really imagine those two entities walking out of the courtroom in a month, 10 months, 2 years, and just shaking hands and saying, well, let's continue our partnership in the ACC?
I think they will leave eventually, but that doesn't mean they're leaving this year or even next year, Mark. I mean, the grant of rights still exists, and I think all these Florida State fans, I mean, have you been on like Locked On Big 12 or the Monty Show every day? Literally every day, according to these people, teams are just changing conferences if you look at the title of their videos. So that's why I just want to make sure.
I don't get involved in that stuff, and maybe I should. We'd have more people watching. We could do that. But yeah, I report on that stuff when there's actually something stated. So the last video I did on any kind of realignment was because the North Carolina AD actually came out and said, we got to leave this conference. We're not making enough money, and made a bunch of various statements. And so I posted a video.
Yeah, no, that's fine, Mark. I mean, he can whine, pout, and complain all he wants to, but he signed the grant of rights. So, I mean, that's tough luck for him. I can't make it that people make bad deals, Mark. I mean, imagine how society would work if every time somebody made a bad deal, they just said, no, this deal doesn't matter. You know, it just doesn't matter because it hurts me personally because I messed up.
Well, I got to say that I don't know if it's just because we are so hyper-focused on sports and all gets reported and talked about, but I don't know if as many contracts in life, in real life, out in other industries are broken as much as sports contracts, coaches' contracts constantly, and player contracts. And it doesn't happen anymore, but I don't know if you remember the days when first of all, draft picks wouldn't show up to training camp and players would sit out all the time and say, you know what, I need to rework my contract. And they'd be in the third year of a 5-year contract, but they'd say, no, not good enough. I'm not showing up to training camp until we get our contract renegotiated. Now, I don't hear of that happening anymore. And maybe that's because the CBA worked all that out and figured it out. I know that with the salary slotting of the NFL draft, that has cured most of that, if not all of it, for the rookie portion of that. But yeah, that used to drive me crazy in every sport. Baseball, guys saying, after they had a big year, they were upset that they signed a contract for 5 years. Well, you signed a contract, meaning if you hit 198 this year, the team's not coming to you saying we're cutting your pay. No, they signed a contract. So just because you had a big year, that's the trade-off. It's security versus potential. That's what you're weighing when you sign a contract.
Right, Mark. And you know what make Florida State and these schools look really bad is if like halfway through the contract or something like that, they decided to re-extend the contract or make the contract longer than initially, because that would imply they were happy with the contract. Don't you think that would make them look worse?
Yes, I don't know that I completely followed that. One more time.
So don't you think it could potentially make Florida State look bad and all these other schools trying to leave if just a few years ago they decided to extend the contract out further because of how they were happy with the contract?
Yeah, it's not like they did that, a decade ago. It was not long ago that they made that decision to keep it going and extend.
Yeah, I mean, it's their fault, Mark. And they can complain all they want, but you know what, Mark? Alabama deserved to be in the playoff. And unfortunately for Florida State, they also deserve to be in the playoff, but there's only one spot. And then Florida State goes out there and loses by 60 to Georgia. I mean, if you want to make a legitimate argument, I feel like more people would be on their side if they would have been competitive in that game. Now, I know that's not right, but don't you think that was the reality of the situation?
Well, the reality also was, as Kirby Smart pointed out after the game, we didn't play Florida State exactly. So
I get that because Florida State's full of quitters.
It's on their record and it's valid and it has to be taken as this is what it is. And so I don't believe in that whole they didn't want to be here or they didn't have X, Y, and Z players, but it was pretty egregious. So if we want to be fair about the evaluation of the two teams, we can't really take that game to properly evaluate Georgia and Florida State last year.
I get that, Mark, but at some point, for the average sports fan, even knowing that, there's just a number that's so large that it's incomprehensible to think that having all those players back would have impacted it going the other way.
So and 60. Yes, so it's 63-3. So it sounds to me, and you can tell me if I'm reading this correctly, and I'm also basing this on our myriad of conversations in the past. Let's say everything was on the line. This was a playoff game, and Georgia and Florida State both made it, that you wouldn't have been surprised if Georgia would have won that game 35-10.
Correct.
Okay.
I think Florida was a top 10 team in the country. I think they were worse than the Magnificent Seven teams, which was, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, and there was a few others that year. But I think they would have been smoked by all of those teams.
Yeah, our Florida State contingent don't like when I say this, but I'm just giving my perspective. And it can't be proven because the games were not played. I do believe that Florida State should have been selected for the playoff because I believe in results and conference championships and all of that. I do not believe that they were one of the 4 best teams in the country before Jordan Travis got hurt or after he got hurt. Now, I do think that they had an argument before he got hurt, but if we're just talking about the 4 best and the committee, I don't fault the committee. I don't have an issue with the committee in this way. In no way are they tied to, okay, you've got to select all the teams that have the best record. And then if there are ties, then you have to come up with some kind of formula for why you broke. No, all they're asked to do is select the 4 best teams.
Correct. And what's ironic about this is we've been, as fans, been encouraging these programs to play massive games. And if Texas didn't play Alabama, then Florida State would have probably had no argument. If Alabama played Wagner and Texas played Mercer, Florida State was clearly the 5th best out of those 5 teams.
Yeah, I hear you. I still feel bad for them and don't like that it came to that an undefeated team was left out of the playoff.
Oh, I agree, Mark, but that's something that was possible since the creation of the system. I mean, that was the first thing everybody noticed when we created the system. And unfortunately for Florida State, it happened to bit them. It was just a strange year in college football. It was an outlier type year.
Sure. But that possibility, at least the way I drew it up, in fairness, was all 5 conference champions go undefeated.
Right. Instead, you had 2 one-loss teams, but the 3rd team beat the 4th best team. It's unfortunate for Florida State, but, maybe they shouldn't have struggled against Pitt and Boston College and these very weak teams and played around with their food all year. They could have looked... Sorry.
And it's a good point that you make about while we can emphasize this loss that Bama took, they did play the game. So 2 of the 4 or 6 or 7 best teams in the country did play. So there was going to be a loser to the game. Michigan fans, hang on. I don't mean this, but let's say at the point that the game was played and at the point that the selection was made for the playoff, it could be argued that those were the 2 best teams in the country. They just happened to play each other. And so somebody had to lose a game. The 2 best teams in the country can play each other, and that doesn't mean that the team that lost is suddenly the 20th best team in the country. They could still be the 2nd best team in the country.
Correct. And we've talked about this before when the 25th team loses to the 8th ranked team in the country by 3 points. And yet they're kicked out of the top 25.
Yes. Oh, yes.
But,
yeah,
that's all I got for you. It's good talking to you, Mark.
Cool. I appreciate it, man. Have a good night.
You do the same.
It's our guide to real MVP chiming in for the SEC. And here we go. It's our SEC rankings. And go back and watch the video. It's posted here on the main channel. We've got our folks from the SEC channel here as well. So please subscribe. Matthew's jumping on to talk some college football with us. Matthew, what's going on?
Nothing much, Mark. How about you?
I'm doing just fine. We can't see you, but that's okay. We can hear you. That's good enough.
Okay.
There you are.
There we go. Okay, yeah, my Wi-Fi is going in and out, so hopefully, as long as you can hear me, we're good. Based on the comments and then what Drill was just talking about, can we move on to next year? Last year's in the past. We have 90 days or something like that till college football starts. Let's move on till next year. But while we're looking back,
before you get started on that, Matthew, absolutely, we can talk about whatever you want to, especially concerning the SEC, because that's what this live stream is about. But to a certain extent, I got to say that based on tonight's topic, it is all about not just last year, but like 1940.
No, I know, but the concentration was on last year, and I just think a lot of this stuff's being beaten to death of Florida State, this, Florida State, that. It's an interesting discussion, but it is what it is, in my opinion. But I won't go into that. So Texas all time, when your rankings do come out, where do you think they're going? I don't know if you've already done this and or if you haven't, where do you think they're going to be?
Well, all the numbers are tabulated, but I have not put them all together on a list. So I believe they're going to be about 6th or 7th.
Okay. Yeah, that would have been my guess. So, I mean, that makes sense. I know it hurts me to say that Oklahoma's a better program, and I'm guessing they're probably going to be, 3rd, 4th?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is what it is when it comes to that. But overall, I know you brought up like all the original members have won an SE or won a championship. I'm not going to count Texas and Oklahoma in this discussion for the SEC to win a national championship. Out of the original members who have not, who has the best chance to win a championship?
A national championship?
Yeah, if there's any.
Okay. Let's see what our national championship list is here. What do we got? We've got. I can't find it in here. Anyway, out of a school in the SEC that's not won a national championship. Oh my goodness. Ole Miss, Texas A&M, they've won national championships.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't think Arkansas has won one. So who hasn't? Vanderbilt, obviously. Wait, has Vanderbilt? Was there some championship? Okay.
No. They've only finished ranked 3 times. We got Missouri. And we've got Missouri. Yeah, South Carolina, Missouri. I would have told you South Carolina 10 years ago when Steve Spurrier was there, but based on what we saw last season, maybe Mizzou gets in this year as a 5 seed, 6 seed, and yeah, they're the obvious choice right now.
Yeah, I mean, they're spending a lot of money in NIL, so I definitely think they could do that. I think they're going to make the playoff. That's I wish I could have gone on with Darrell because Darrell, if you said $100 for every team, I will bet you $100 right now. I've already have a couple bets like this. Oklahoma is not getting in the playoff. I would bet.
Well, I put him on the spot.
Yeah, I agree, but anyone that wants to go look at Oklahoma and if they have that chance, go look at the roster. So I'm going to say. There was another thing I put out. You have it on your SEC channel. I said it during the Texas live stream. I've ranked running back rooms in the SEC for this year, and I want you to guess because I was shocked by it, but I don't think I'm wrong. I could be off by a couple spots where I have LSU.
Running back rooms in the SEC. I'm going to say that they are 13th.
That was a fantastic guess, Mark. I have them at 12. They are not. The room is not good. It shocked me because you have LSU with all this talent, or you think they have all this talent, and then you get to the running back room, and you have Josh Williams is the returning leading rusher. He was a walk-on in like 2019, 2020. The only bright spot they got the number 6 running back in the country in Caleb Durham. That's it. That's the only bright spot of that room. Logan Diggs went to Ole Miss. By the way, I think I ranked them 2nd in the SEC running back room wise. I had Texas 1. People can debate that. I think the 3 to debate, in my opinion, and I'm going to get hate for it, are Texas, Texas A&M, and Ole Miss. I had Georgia number 4 because they have Trevor Etienne, but if you get past that, you have 2 freshmen that are coming in that are highly touted, but they have no carries. And you have a guy last year in Roderick Robinson that had, I think, 17 carries or something like that. So, and they lose their 2 leading backs. So that's why I have them at 4th. And Alabama at 5th. Alabama could definitely climb. Alabama has an insanely talented running back room. They just lose a couple guys last year that they had, including Roydale Williams. But, yeah, I was just shocked that LSU was that low.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, you led me somewhat into that answer, but I also know that I've had conversations with LSU people, and even though I've not done a deep dive on everyone's roster and personnel, that just look at last year, I can't think of a team that was as good as LSU was last year, like a top 10 to 15 team in the country that had its quarterback basically play running back. Even the Lamar Jackson teams and the Johnny Manziel teams had a runner who ran for 700-800 yards. They had nobody.
No, Logan Diggs, I can look at it right now because I have it right in front of me. Logan Diggs last year had 653 yards.
Yeah.
But I mean, and he's going to be the backup or 3rd string of Ole Miss because the guy that got from Miami of Ohio is pretty good as well. So that room is really loaded. That's a team. If people are I think this is going to be a really cool case study this year is Ole Miss. they have went all in on the transfer portal. If you look at the roster, all their best players, other than Jackson Dart for the most part, are from the transfer portal, and we're going to see if it works out for them. It's going to be very interesting, and it's
They are this
honestly,
year's Florida State.
yeah, they are, and it's kind of weird because I think Lane Kiffin is in the same situation that Steve Sarkisian was in last year, where they hadn't won a lot of big games as coaches, but then that can all change this year. He can shut up the haters by winning good big games this year, because I thought they should have beaten Alabama, honestly, last year, and they didn't. They honestly weren't really even in that game for the most part. So he's got to have some big wins, in my opinion, this year.
Yeah, people love Ole Miss, and yeah, they have torn it up in the portal. I was in the process of putting together a video. Actually, I did post that video, their top 5 transfer editions, and that was tough to narrow it down to 5. They have 22 total, and about 10 of them are really good players, beginning with Walter Nolan.
Yeah. So I wanted to, if you don't mind, I wanted to pull up that comment by Jareel. Do you think a 9-3 Oklahoma will make the playoffs? To me, I see this is so hard because it's the first year of a 12-team playoff. I don't know if 9-3 gets you there. There's only one team I'm confident in. If they went 9-3, they would 100% be in, and that's Florida. That's the only team I'm confident in. And that's not going to happen. But I'm that because with that schedule, you have to put a team that goes 9-3 in. You have to. Oklahoma's schedule is nowhere near that level of difficulty. It's hard. It's harder. I think it's even harder than Texas's, but it's not Florida worthy. I think Mark and I have discussed this. I think Oklahoma actually has a better shot as a -3 team. Mark has talked about the +3 and -3 and how like 4 or 5 teams in each conference either win 3 more games than they did last year or lose 3 more games. I think Oklahoma's a -3 team. I think they're going to win 7 games. I really believe that. They played a very weak Big 12 schedule last year. They play an SEC schedule that I would say is slightly above average this year. So I think they're going to only win 7 games. That's just my opinion, though.
Yeah. So I don't know what the committee's approach is going to be. So basically, they're going to look at non-conference play and try to determine how good each conference is. And we go into it thinking that the SEC or the Big Ten's 1 and the other one's 2, and then there's a big drop off. And that remains to be seen. But I think we would all be shocked if that wasn't the case. And then determine, are they going to go into this really favoring the SEC and the Big Ten, or is it going to have to wear on for a few years for them to get to a point where they're actually jumping teams that have worse records from those 2 conferences over? We can almost assume, we can assume that they will give the preferential treatment to those 2 conferences, so that there's 2 10-2s. If it's an SEC versus ACC or a Big Ten versus Big 12, we know who's going to get the spot. But are they going to jump a 9-3 past a 10-2? Because if you go through all the years, even beyond and before the college football playoff, and just look at the rankings and where teams finished, 10-2 is that's the break-off point. Most of the 10-2s make it, some don't, but that's the break-off point throughout the history of modern college football if you apply it to a 12-team field every year. And that's where they're going to be making tons of decisions. So I don't know if a 9-3 Oklahoma is going to make it, because there could be a glut of Wisconsin, Michigan, Tennessee, and whoever else at 10-2.
Yeah, it all depends what everyone else's record is. I mean, just think about ahead of, or what people are thinking who's ahead of Oklahoma right now in the SEC. You're going to have Georgia, you're going to have Texas, you're going to have Ole Miss, you're going to have Missouri, and you're going to have I know I'm forgetting Alabama. So that's 5 teams right there that most people would agree are better than Oklahoma. They're not putting 6 teams, like hypothetically, the 6th best team in the SEC is not going to get. That's just not going to happen. But Jim Root or R said, what about 8-4 for Florida? Not happening. I know. I don't. Again, I don't know. I don't know. That one's like iffy for me. I guess it depends. In your 4 losses, if you lose by like a combined total, let's say 4 losses, you lose by 21 points. Possibly.
Yeah, They're competitive. Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I could see that.
Yeah. And that's why it really does suck that we have to throw in a group of 5 team now when, like you've said on here before, all the good group of 5 teams are in conferences now. So that doesn't make any sense to have that when, like, an 8-4 Florida, let's say hypothetically they went 8-4 and they were close losses, played the best group of 5 team. What would be the spread on that game, Mark?
Florida against last year's Liberty team.
Yeah.
Oregon was a 17-point favorite, and they beat them by 46 or 49 to 6, whatever it was.
Yeah.
They'd probably be a 12 or 13-point favorite, but they might have won the game by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think your Texas team was and I'm not cherry picking. Again, I go through this all the time, as you well know, comparing the group of 5 against the Power 5. I'll bring up 2 things. One would be that your Texas team that went
5-7.
I think it was the 5-7 team.
Yeah, it was. I know you're going to say Louisiana.
Beat Louisiana.
No.
Billy Napier's 11-1 team, 12-1 team. So there you go. One of the best group of 5 teams. They lose by 3 touchdowns against Texas team that goes 5-7. And going into bowl season last year, I added up the records of all the conference championship game participants in the group of 5, all 10 of them. They were like 4-17 against the Power 5. The conference championship game participants.
Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like teams that if they got their best possible rosters together outside the group of 5 or outside of like the Power 4 now, who could compete. I think possibly Memphis because of their recruiting base. And if they got enough money together, they probably could. They could be like a UCF type team like a couple years ago. And maybe if the Magic comes back, Boise State. But those are like the only 2 teams I can even think of.
Tulane's been really good.
Yeah, Tulane has been good as well. So those 3, I'm trying to think of anyone else. If you
Tulane played a really good game against Ole Miss last year.
Yeah, and that was without Michael Pratt.
Yes.
Yeah, so those 3 teams, I guess. If there's any more, they're probably in the South because you have to have a good recruiting base. So that's what I was trying to think of.
Yeah, when you think about what's happened in college football with the treatment of the group of 5, it makes no sense because when there was UCF playing as well as they did, and we had Cincinnati and we had Houston, that has been nothing special recently. But if you go back to the Ed Oliver teams, the Derek Ward teams that beat Florida State in a Peach Bowl, those teams couldn't make it into the playoffs.
Yeah.
They left them out of the playoff, and now the best teams in the group of 5, those 3 and SMU and BYU, if you want to consider them a former group of 5, they go into the Power 4, and now the group of 5 gets an automatic spot.
Do you think? I think it's honestly because they know now there's no, unless something crazy happens, they can't be embarrassed. Like, I think they know they're going to beat them. Whereas back then, I think they actually thought, hey, we could lose this team and it's not going to be a good look. I mean, that's a possibility. I don't know if that's the
those
reason
teams
why
did win a pretty fair share of New Year's 6 games. Now, those aren't playoff teams, but they're really good teams.
Yeah. I mean, I still, Boise State was like my second best favorite team growing up. And the Kellen Moore, Doug Martin, I'm trying to think of the 2 wide receivers they had. But that team, like, if you put them in a 12-team playoff today, I think they could have won a game. I don't think they're winning the national championship, but I think they could have won a game.
Yeah, I could see that.
But yeah, I actually think the system, I don't know if you've discussed this at all yet, but the 5th spot might be the second best spot. Because you get the group of 5 team and then you're still playing. So I really think Rust, I'm a big Peyton Manning NFL fan. They got buys all the time and they look like crap most of the time in the first round of the playoffs because that team, especially an offensive minded team, I think rely on timing and execution. And when you take 2 weeks off and go play football, that takes a while to kick back on, honestly. And I think the 5th spot's kind of good because you don't have that bye. You get to play a really weak opponent that you're probably going to beat, and you kind of get to treat it as a scrimmage. And then you get to go in and play the worst the worst team that's you would play number 4, right? You play
Yes.
The 4th. Yeah. So yeah, you get to play the worst team that won their conference.
So folks, think about this. The way it's forming with the Big Ten and the SEC, the 1 and 2 seeds are most likely going to be the best teams in the country.
Yeah.
The 3 and 4 seeds, conference champions from the ACC, unless Clemson has a great year, Florida State has a great year, Utah is a possibility. But even a great Utah team we've not seen Utah be any better than about the 10th best team in the country, for as much respect as I have for Utah. So you've got I'll just throw out numbers that are ballpark. The 3 and 4 seeds are the 12th and 15th best teams in the country. And then you've got the 5 seed, who might be the second best team in the country. And if not, they're probably the third best team in the country. So that's the 5 seed. The 5 seed's Ohio State, it's Georgia, it's Alabama, it's Michigan, it's somebody, Oregon. And yeah, they've got a walkthrough against Liberty, Boise State, whomever. And then they turn around and they play maybe the 13th or 14th best team in the country as a conference champion in that next round. I'd almost rather play them, depending on how it shakes out, than play the 8-9 winner that might be Penn State and Ole Miss.
Yeah. It probably will be someone like that. Yeah, the system honestly doesn't make any sense.
Especially if there's an upset in the Big 12 championship game, like Oklahoma State wins or Kansas State, and they're like the 20th best team in the country.
Yeah, I think honestly that's a spot. I'm hoping Texas can get that. Obviously, I hope they just make the 12-team playoff. I think they will, but that to me that's a spot I want. I don't even want. I mean, 1 would be, I think, the second or best spot, you could argue, but everything after that, I'd rather have number 5. I think it'd be 1 or 5.
Yeah, to credit DeReal, he's been all over that. He's called many times and talked about that.
No, it makes sense. I will give him some credit on that one. And like I said, DeReal, I have Kentucky right now still beating Texas. So no hate for me on Kentucky. I think they're a pretty good team. But
wait a minute. You've got Kentucky beating Texas.
I do. I think we're going to have 2 losses. I think Georgia and Kentucky are going to be our 2 losses.
Oh, okay.
I've said it for a while. We'll see if I'm right or wrong on that. I don't want to be right, but I just have a feeling we're going to lose a game we probably shouldn't lose. And Kentucky is the team that strikes me like that's going to do it, honestly.
So absolutely. What you're saying, it sounds stupid in a way, but people have to realize if you go through a college football season, and I'm just ballparking numbers, 70% of the upsets are like, okay, or losses, I should say. Losses by really good teams are the obvious. Okay, they lost to the 2 toughest road games they had. But about 40% of the losses aren't to the obvious teams. They're to the trap game type teams. And that's what it is.
Yeah, and the other games I'm trying to think that could be that people were discussing. Mississippi State. That's another thing I found out when I looked at their running back room plus their quarterback room, which we've looked at so far, Mark, on the Texas channel. They're going to be bad. We're not losing to them. Florida, I mean, I guess there's a chance, but Kentucky just fits the bill of hard-nosed. They're going to bring it to us. They have talent. They have a really good coach, and I'm high on Brock Vandagriff, so that's why I picked them to beat Texas for right now.
Okay. You get the thumbs up from DeReal.
I appreciate that. The last thing I will ask, so I'm not going to give you Georgia because that's an easy answer. Over the next, let's say 5 to 10 years, you can pick either one. Who do you think is going to be the most successful SEC team other than Georgia?
Texas.
Okay. I'm not going to argue that. I don't disagree. Moose, man, there was a comment up there earlier. He said he would have LSU ranked ahead of Texas. I don't know if that was all time or going into next year. I mean, next year possibly. All time is, Mark, I don't know. You can dive into that more than I can.
Adam says Ole Miss, if he's answering the question that you just threw out, and 5 Adam is saying Oklahoma.
That's out there. Ole Miss is hard because if they keep Lane Kiffin, possibly. If they don't, no.
Moose was saying all time for, what was it, LSU over Texas? Is that what he was claiming? LSU over Texas all time?
He's just going by natties, apparently. He says Texas has 4 natties.
And LSU has how many?
That's a good question. What do they have?
They don't have. Well, they've got 3 with Saban, Miles, and Ogeron. I think they only had 1 before that. I think it's 4-4.
Yeah.
Let me pull up the natty list here. Where's LSU? It's 4-4. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. Honestly, I don't think LSU was a very good program before Nick Saban got there. I could be completely wrong.
No, they weren't.
Yeah.
Actually, LSU might have 5. Again, people are going to be pissed at me when I revise national championships and I just say, I don't care what all of that is. I'm going with my national championships. No, it's just 4, 1958, 03, 07, 19. So they each have 4. And the rest of it's not that. It's close, but Texas is clearly better, winning other, major bowl games, AP poll points. I'm guessing they're higher. So they're, by 100 points in AP poll points. If we look at this stat, right here, you've got, see this column over here. Don't know if you checked this out before, but I like this column because basically I went through and the number on the left's how many ranked seasons in the top 25, second number's top 10, third number's top 5, and you've got Texas 51, LSU 44, fairly close, 28-22, then 22 times Texas has finished in the top 5 and LSU 10.
Yeah, that's not close.
And what do we got for NFL draft picks? We've got, I don't know if we're going to be able to see the teams. We've got Texas 368, LSU 381. They're up by 13, but it's basically.
No, I'm not surprised by that. Like Hummus Hero put in the comment section, I completely agree that in the BCS College Football Playoff era, LSU's been better. Yes, that's I think the only era you could poll where they have been better than Texas.
Yeah, let's see. 21st century, LSU's won 225, Texas 203. So they're roughly 20 games better.
And think about that. Texas had their worst 10-year period ever during that time. I mean, I just think Texas is a better program. But
now,
LSU
1970, Texas is about 15 games better. Yeah, LSU from the late 80s to Saban in 2000, they won like 30 or 35% of their games in the SEC. They were pretty bad.
Yeah. And it's going to be interesting because I actually think that's who our new rival is going to be. Obviously, we have A&M, Oklahoma, Arkansas already there, and I think LSU is going to be a rivalry with us. So.
I saw you put that in our group chat with our guy Sonny. The only thing I would say to that is the SEC has not designated those two teams to play every year.
Yeah, I know. I think I don't know if it will ever get to that point. But the fan bases already have animosity being so close. And then also there's been like little recruiting battles. I mean, right now, DeCorian Moore, number 1 ranked wide receiver for next year, just decommitted from LSU. And there's a really good chance he ends up at Texas. I would honestly be shocked right now if he doesn't end up at Texas. So there's that one. There was a couple other ones last year that I'm forgetting that went back and forth that they got pissed about. Brian Kelly actually made a comment after one of them and basically said, we don't have to pay for people or something like that. Talking about Texas. Then they also stole Bo Davis from us, our defensive line coach. So I think there's going to be some bad blood. I think that's the new rivalry in the SEC.
Yeah. Anytime I hear a coach complaining about NIL or claiming that that's not the reason they get players, okay, forget it. I don't want to hear from you. You could have made that comment 3 years ago before we knew better. Sure. Okay. We could have possibly said we're waiting to see how this plays out, but now we know better. And I don't think that's the only consideration. I don't think it's always the highest bidder, but you have to come with cash. It's a job. These players are going for the most money or the best situation. If the money's close, they want to get developed for the NFL. Sure, they want to win. Then they probably have some kind of preference about where they want to be.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely agree. And he just complained about that recently too. So it's going to be interesting. Maybe they don't have, they probably aren't on that upper echelon tier of spending, but it's really hard for me to believe that LSU doesn't have enough money to compete.
I find this comment from Moose rather entertaining only because of the conversations I have with Moose all the time about their 1901 national championships at Michigan. So are we talking all time? What time period are we talking about? We were having a conversation about all time, and I'm giving it to Texas over LSU, and now you're focusing on the last 20 years. Okay. Sure. But I thought we were talking all time.
Just from the couple comments he's made, I don't think he's a big fan of Texas, but week two, well, I think we'll have something for him. That's all I'm going to say. That I think we'll have something for him. I think it'll be a good game. But Mark, I will see you soon for the show. Obviously not this Monday, but next Monday. And guys, please check it out on the Texas channel. Go over there, subscribe. We're there. Horns Huddle, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Central down in Austin.
There you go. Bingo. 7 Eastern, 6 Central in Austin, as Matthew says. Horns Huddle Live with Matthew every Monday. So get there on the Texas channel. Okay, Matthew, appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah, have a good night, Mark.
Good night. I love this comment coming in from Moose. Mark, you're the cherry pick king. Yes, I was roasted for selecting that cherry picking 54-year, just small little smattering of time that Ohio State owns the Big Ten since 1970. Yeah, just that little bitty section of games for 54 years. Yeah, cherry picking. And if you were with us, Moose, about an hour ago when DeReal called, I think I made a pretty freaking great case for why 1970 matters. And I can only explain it so well. All right, everyone. We do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. No other comments or questions there in the chat, I do believe, nor phone calls. So thanks for stopping by. We have broken down the SEC. And again, if you've come across a better rating system, please send the link my way and I will check it out. We will be back with the Big Ten on Thursday night. That's at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. We will see you then.